The arrogant heiress thought he was just a homeless stranger. Please rate this story from 1 to 10. Tell us where you are watching from and share if you have a similar experience. Subscribe for new stories every day. Let's begin. It was a Tuesday morning in late October. The sky was gray and heavy with clouds. Isabella stood outside the towering glass building that housed Lawrence Industries. She checked her reflection in the window. Her designer coat fit perfectly. Her heels clicked against the marble steps. She was vice president of operations. She was 32 years old. She had worked at the company for 8 years. Everyone knew her name. Everyone feared her temper. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her emails. There were 17 messages waiting. She deleted 3 without reading them. Her assistant Victoria would handle the rest. Isabella never wasted time on small matters. She looked up and saw a man approaching. He was wearing an old gray jacket. His jeans were faded and torn at the knees. His shoes were scuffed and dirty. He carried a worn canvas bag over his shoulder. The man walked toward the entrance. Isabella stepped in front of him. She looked him up and down. Her expression was cold and sharp. She felt a wave of disgust. How dare he approach this building? This was a place for professionals. This was a place for people who mattered.
Excuse me. What do you think you're doing?
The man stopped. He looked at her with calm, gray eyes. His face showed no emotion. He did not speak.
This is a private building. You can't just walk in here. There's a shelter 3 blocks down. Go there if you need help.
The man remained silent. He studied her face for a moment. Isabella felt a strange unease. His eyes were clear and intelligent. But she pushed the feeling away. She was right. No, he did not belong here.
Did you hear me? I said leave. If you don't go now, I'll call security.
The man nodded once. He turned and walked away without a word. Isabella watched him disappear around the corner. She felt satisfied. She had protected her company. She had done the right thing. She smoothed her coat and walked inside. The lobby was bright and polished. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Isabella walked past the reception desk. The receptionist smiled nervously. Everyone always smiled at Isabella. But their smiles never reached their eyes. Isabella took the private elevator to the 20th floor. She stepped into her office. The view overlooked the entire city. She could see the harbor in the distance. She sat at her desk and opened her laptop. Victoria knocked on the door. She was 26 years old. She had been Isabella's assistant for 2 years. She carried a leather folder and a coffee. She placed them on the desk carefully. Victoria reminded her about the afternoon meeting. The board of directors was gathering at 2. There would be an important announcement. Margaret, Isabella's mother and company chairman, would be there. Victoria said there were rumors about a new investor. Someone had purchased a large number of shares. Nobody knew who it was. Victoria looked worried, but Isabella dismissed her concerns.
Whoever it is will answer to me. This company belongs to my family. We built it from nothing.
Victoria nodded and left quietly. Isabella spent the morning reviewing reports. The numbers were good. Profits were up 12%. She had implemented new cost-cutting measures. She had fired 30 employees last quarter. The board had praised her efficiency. Her mother had called her ruthless. Isabella considered it a compliment. At 1:30 she walked to the boardroom. The room was enormous. A long mahogany table dominated the center. 20 leather chairs surrounded it. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city. Several board members were already seated. They chatted in low voices. Isabella took her seat near the head of the table. Her mother Margaret sat at the very end. Margaret was 60 years old. Her silver hair was pulled back in a tight bun. Her expression was always serious. Richard entered the room. He was a board member and one of Isabella's rivals. He was 45 and ambitious. He smiled at Isabella, but his eyes were calculating. Richard had always wanted more power. He sat across from her and opened his briefcase. The room gradually filled with executives. At exactly 2 o'clock, Margaret stood up. The room fell silent. Margaret announced that the company had a new major shareholder. This person had acquired 35% of Lawrence Industries. This made them the largest individual shareholder. even larger than the Lawrence family. The board members murmured in surprise. Isabella felt her stomach tighten. Who would dare buy into her family's company? Margaret gestured toward the door. It opened slowly. A man walked in. Isabella's breath caught in her throat. It was him. The man from this morning. The one she had called homeless. The one she had threatened with security. He was wearing the same gray jacket. The same faded jeans. But now he carried a leather briefcase. His expression was calm and unreadable. Margaret introduced him as Alexander. She said he was an investment strategist. He had built 3 major companies from scratch. He was known for turning failing businesses into empires. He rarely appeared in public. He preferred to work behind the scenes. But he had decided to take a visible role in Lawrence Industries. The board members looked impressed. Some stood to shake his hand. Alexander walked around the table. He shook hands with each board member. He spoke briefly with Margaret. Then he approached Isabella. He extended his hand. She stared at it. Her face burned with embarrassment. She felt sick. She wanted to disappear. But she forced herself to stand. She shook his hand. His grip was firm and brief.
We met this morning. You were very clear about your priorities.
His voice was calm. There was no anger in it. But Isabella heard the judgment. She tried to speak, but no words came. Alexander moved on. He took a seat at the opposite end of the table. He opened his briefcase and pulled out several documents. Margaret asked Alexander to share his vision. Alexander explained that he had been watching Lawrence Industries for 2 years. He saw tremendous potential. But he also saw serious problems. The company had become arrogant. It had lost touch with its customers. It had lost touch with its employees. It needed to rebuild from the inside. He looked directly at Isabella.
Starting with leadership.
The words hung in the air. Isabella felt everyone's eyes on her. Richard smiled slightly. Margaret's expression remained neutral. Alexander continued speaking. He outlined a restructuring plan. Several departments would be reorganized. Some executives would be reassigned. He said the company needed leaders who understood humility. Leaders who treated people with respect. Then he dropped the bombshell. Alexander announced that Isabella would be removed as Vice President of Operations. She would be reassigned to a regional manager position. The new role was 3 levels below her current position. It would require her to work directly with frontline employees. She would oversee a single warehouse location. The board members gasped. Margaret said nothing. Richard looked delighted.
You can't do this. This is my company. My family built this.
Your family owns 28%. I own 35%. The rest is distributed among other shareholders. I can do this. And I am doing this.
Isabella looked at her mother. Margaret met her gaze. Then, Margaret looked away. She did not defend her daughter. She did not argue. Isabella felt betrayed. Her mother had always been hard. But this was something else. This was abandonment. The meeting continued for another hour. Alexander outlined more changes. He was bringing in new talent. He was investing in employee development. He was opening communication channels. The board members asked questions. Alexander answered each one with precision. Isabella sat frozen in her chair. She could not process what was happening. Her entire world was collapsing. When the meeting ended, people filed out slowly. Some congratulated Alexander. Others avoided looking at Isabella. Richard walked past her with a smug expression. He said she should have been nicer to people. Maybe then, she would have had allies. Isabella wanted to scream at him. But she had no strength left. She remained in her seat as the room emptied. Alexander packed his briefcase. Margaret waited by the door. Finally, Alexander walked toward the exit. Isabella found her voice.
Why are you doing this?
Alexander stopped. He turned to face her. His expression softened slightly, but his eyes remained firm.
Because you needed to learn something. Power without compassion is just cruelty. You treated me like I was nothing. You didn't see a person. You saw an inconvenience.
I didn't know who you were.
Exactly. You didn't know. And you didn't care. That's the problem.
He walked out. Margaret followed him, without a word. Isabella sat alone in the enormous boardroom. The city sprawled beneath her. But she felt small and powerless. For the first time in her life she understood what it meant to lose everything. And she had no one to blame but herself. The next morning Isabella reported to her new position. The warehouse was located in an industrial district. It was 40 minutes from downtown. The building was old and gray. Trucks rumbled in and out constantly. The air smelled like diesel and cardboard. Isabella parked her car in the employee lot. She looked at the building. This was her new reality. She walked inside. The main floor was massive. Rows of shelves stretched to the ceiling. Forklifts moved between aisles. Workers in orange vests loaded pallets. The noise was overwhelming. Beeping machines and shouting voices filled the space. Isabella found the manager's office. It was a small room with a window overlooking the floor. Thomas was waiting for her. He was Alexander's business partner. He was in his early 40s. His handshake was firm but friendly. Thomas explained that she would be overseeing daily operations. She would manage inventory and staff scheduling. She would handle customer complaints. She would work directly with the warehouse team. He said Alexander wanted her to understand every part of the business, starting from the bottom. Isabella asked why Alexander was doing this. Thomas smiled but did not answer directly. He said Alexander believed in second chances. But those chances had to be earned. Isabella would need to prove herself. Thomas left her alone in the office. She sat at the desk. It was scratched and old. The chair squeaked when she moved. She looked through the window, at the workers below. None of them knew who she was. None of them cared. Her first day was brutal. She tried to give orders, but nobody listened. The warehouse supervisor was a woman named Carla. Carla had worked there for 15 years. She knew every system and every worker. When Isabella suggested changes, Carla ignored her. Carla said she had seen managers come and go. Most of them did not last a month. Isabella felt humiliated. At lunch she sat alone in the break room. The workers gathered at tables. They laughed and joked. They talked about their families and weekend plans. Nobody invited Isabella to join them. She was an outsider. She had always been an outsider. But before she had power. Now she had nothing. One worker dropped his lunch tray. Food spilled across the floor. Everyone laughed, but it was good-natured. They helped him clean up. Isabella watched them. She realized she had never experienced that kind of camaraderie. At the corporate office, everyone had been afraid of her. Or, they had wanted something from her. There had been no real friendships. No real connections. The afternoon was worse. A shipment arrived late. Carla blamed the scheduling system. Isabella had approved that system last year. She tried to explain the logic behind it. Carla said, logic did not matter when trucks sat waiting for 3 hours. Isabella had no response. She had never considered the practical consequences. She had only looked at numbers on a spreadsheet. By the end of the day, Isabella was exhausted. Her feet hurt from standing. Her head pounded from the noise. She drove home, in silence. Her apartment felt cold and empty. She had always loved this place. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Designer furniture. A view of the harbor. But tonight, it felt hollow. She poured a glass of wine. She stood by the window. The city lights stretched into the distance. Somewhere, out there, Alexander was probably working. Planning his next move. She felt a surge of anger. Then the anger faded into something else. Shame. Regret. She had treated him like garbage. And she had not even questioned her own behavior. The following weeks were a slow torture. Isabella went to the warehouse every morning. She tried to learn the systems. She tried to connect with the workers. But she was terrible at it. She did not know how to talk to people as equals. She had spent her entire career giving orders. Now nobody wanted to listen. Carla remained distant, but professional. She answered Isabella's questions. But she never offered extra help. The other workers followed Carla's lead. They were polite but cold. Isabella felt isolated. She had felt isolated her whole life. But she had never noticed it before. One afternoon, a truck driver got into an argument with a dock worker. Voices rose. The situation escalated quickly. Isabella rushed out of her office. She tried to calm them down. She used her old authoritative tone. Both men turned on her. The truck driver said she had no idea what she was talking about. The dock worker said she should go back to her office. Carla stepped in and resolved the situation. Isabella retreated in embarrassment. That night she could not sleep. She kept replaying the moment. The look in their eyes. They had not seen a manager. They had seen someone pretending. And they were right. She was pretending. She did not know how to do this job. She did not know how to be a real person. The next morning, she arrived early. She found Carla organizing inventory. Isabella asked if she could help. Carla looked surprised. She handed Isabella a clipboard. Together, they counted boxes. They worked in silence for an hour. When they finished, Carla thanked her. It was a small gesture, but it felt significant. Over the next 2 weeks, Isabella showed up early every day. She helped with loading. She learned how to operate the forklift. She made mistakes constantly. Once she nearly crashed into a shelf. The workers laughed. But this time, Isabella laughed too. It was the first time she had laughed at herself. It felt strange and liberating. One evening, as she was leaving, Carla stopped her. Carla said she had noticed the change. Isabella was trying. That was more than most managers did. Carla asked if Isabella wanted to join them for drinks on Friday. A few workers went to a bar near the warehouse. Nothing fancy. Just beer and conversation. Isabella hesitated. She had never done anything like that. But she forced herself to say yes. Carla smiled. It was the first real smile Isabella had received in weeks. Friday came. Isabella drove to the bar. It was a small place with wooden tables and dim lighting. 6 workers were already there. They waved her over. Isabella sat down. Someone handed her a beer. The conversation was easy and casual. They talked about sports. They talked about their kids. They complained about traffic. One worker asked Isabella about her background. She hesitated. Then, she told them the truth. She had been vice president. She had been demoted. She had treated people badly. Now she was trying to learn. The table went quiet. Then, Carla raised her glass. She said everyone deserves a second chance. The others nodded. They clinked their glasses together. Isabella felt something unexpected. Acceptance. These people did not care about her title. They did not care about her money. They cared about whether she was decent, whether she was real. For the first time in her life she felt seen. But the peace did not last. The following Monday, Alexander visited the warehouse. He walked through the facility with Thomas. They observed operations. They took notes. Isabella watched from her office window. Her heart raced. She had not seen him since the boardroom. Alexander stopped to talk with Carla. They spoke for several minutes. Carla pointed to different areas. She explained the workflow. Alexander listened carefully. Then he looked up at the office. His eyes met Isabella's. She looked away quickly. Shame flooded through her again. After his tour, Alexander climbed the stairs to her office. He knocked on the door. Isabella told him to come in. He entered and closed the door behind him. He sat in the chair across from her desk. For a moment, neither of them spoke.
Carla says you're making progress.
Isabella did not know how to respond. Was this a compliment? Was it a test? She decided to be honest.
I'm trying. It's harder than I thought.
What's hard about it?
Everything. I don't know how to talk to people. I don't know how to be part of a team. I've spent my whole life being separate.
Alexander studied her. His expression was unreadable. Then he leaned back in his chair.
When I was 23, I lost everything. I had started a business. It failed. I was bankrupt. I was homeless for 6 months.
Isabella's eyes widened. She had not expected this. Alexander continued.
I lived in shelters. I stood in line for food. People walked past me like I was invisible. Some people were cruel. They said I was lazy. They said I deserved it.
He paused. His voice remained steady, but Isabella heard the pain beneath it.
One woman gave me a coat. It was winter, and I was freezing. She didn't ask questions. She just gave it to me. That coat saved my life.
Isabella felt tears building. She fought them back. Alexander looked at her directly.
When you insulted me that morning, you had no idea who I was. But that wasn't the point. The point is you didn't care. You saw someone struggling, and you pushed them away.
I'm sorry.
I know, but sorry isn't enough. You need to understand why it was wrong. You need to change how you see people.
He stood up. He walked to the door. Then he turned back.
You have 3 months. If you can prove you've learned something, you'll be considered for a promotion. If not, you'll be let go.
He left. Isabella sat alone. His story echoed in her mind. Homeless for 6 months. And she had treated him like garbage. The weight of her actions crushed her. She put her head in her hands and finally let herself cry. The next few weeks were different. Isabella threw herself into the work. She studied every process. She asked questions. She admitted when she did not know something. The workers began to warm to her. Slowly, cautiously. But it was happening. One morning, a new employee arrived. His name was Jake. He was 19. It was his first real job. He looked terrified. Carla assigned Isabella to train him. Isabella remembered her first day. The fear. The isolation. She decided to do better. She showed Jake around. She explained each task carefully. She made jokes to ease his nerves. When he made a mistake, she helped him fix it. She did not yell. She did not criticize. By the end of the day, Jake thanked her. He said she was the nicest boss he had ever had. Isabella felt something unfamiliar. Pride. Not in her power, but in her kindness. That evening, she stayed late. She was reviewing inventory reports when her mother called. Margaret's voice was crisp and businesslike. She asked how the warehouse was going. Isabella said it was going well. Margaret paused. Margaret said she had heard good things. Alexander had been impressed with Isabella's progress. Some board members had noticed the change. Margaret's tone softened slightly. She admitted she had been hard on Isabella. Maybe too hard. But she had wanted Isabella to be strong. She had wanted her to be a leader. Margaret said sometimes, strength looks different than we expect.
Why didn't you defend me? In the boardroom. When he demoted me.
There was a long silence. Margaret's voice was quiet when she finally spoke. She said because Isabella had needed to fall. She had become cruel. Margaret had seen it happening for years. She had not known how to stop it. When Alexander proposed the demotion, Margaret had agreed. It was the only way to save Isabella. From herself. Isabella felt tears again. But this time, they were different. Not tears of shame. Tears of understanding. Her mother had let her fall, so she could learn to stand.
I'm trying, Mom. I'm really trying.
Margaret's voice cracked slightly. She said she knew. And she was proud. They talked for another 20 minutes. It was the longest real conversation they had ever had. When they hung up, Isabella felt lighter. But the peace did not last long. The following week, Richard appeared at the warehouse. He was still on the board. He had come to conduct a surprise inspection. He walked through the facility with a clipboard. He pointed out every small problem. He criticized the organization system. He questioned worker efficiency. Carla looked furious. Richard made his way to Isabella's office. He sat down without being invited. He looked around at the cramped space. His expression was mocking. Richard said he had heard about her progress, but he did not believe it. People like Isabella did not change. They just got better at pretending. Richard revealed his real purpose. He was building a case against Alexander. Several board members were unhappy with the changes. They missed the old way of doing things. Richard wanted to force Alexander out. He wanted Isabella's help. If she testified about unfair treatment, she could get her old job back.
No.
Richard looked surprised. He had expected her to jump at the chance. He reminded her that Alexander had humiliated her. He had destroyed her career. This was her opportunity for revenge.
He didn't destroy my career. He saved it. And he's right about everything.
Richard's face darkened. He stood up. He said she was a fool. She was throwing away her future. When he took control of the company, she would regret this. He stormed out. Carla had been standing outside. She had heard everything. She looked at Isabella with new respect. That night Isabella could not sleep. Richard's threat worried her. If he succeeded in removing Alexander, everything would return to the old way. The company would go back to being cold and ruthless. All the progress would be lost. She had to do something. But she did not know what. The next morning she called Alexander. His assistant put her through. Alexander's voice was calm when he answered. Isabella told him about Richard's visit. She explained the plan to remove him. She offered to help in any way she could.
Why would you help me? I took everything from you.
No. You showed me what I had become. You gave me a chance to be better. I don't want to lose that.
There was a pause. Alexander thanked her for the warning. He said he would handle Richard, but he appreciated her loyalty. It meant more than she knew. They hung up. Isabella felt nervous. Richard was dangerous, and she had just made an enemy. The tension built over the following days. Rumors spread through the company. Everyone knew something was happening. Board members took sides. Some supported Alexander's vision. Others wanted the old hierarchy back. The company felt like it was splitting in two. Isabella focused on her work. She could not control what happened at the corporate level. But she could control what happened at the warehouse. She made sure operations ran smoothly. She supported her team. She proved that the new way could work. 2 weeks later, Margaret called another board meeting. This time, Isabella was not invited. But Victoria sent her updates. Victoria said Richard had presented his case. He had accused Alexander of reckless management. He had pointed to falling stock prices. Some board members had nodded in agreement. Then, Alexander had responded. He showed projections for the next 5 years. He showed employee satisfaction scores. They had doubled in 3 months. He showed customer feedback. Complaints had dropped by 40%. The changes were working. They just needed time. Margaret had called for a vote. The result was close. But Alexander had survived. Barely. Richard had stormed out of the meeting. He had resigned from the board. But he had promised this was not over. Victoria said everyone was shaken. The company felt fragile. That evening, Alexander visited the warehouse again. He found Isabella in her office. She was working late as usual. He knocked and entered. This time, he looked tired. The stress of the board fight showed in his eyes.
Thank you for the warning. It helped me prepare.
I'm glad. Are you okay?
Alexander smiled slightly. He said he had been through worse. But it was nice to have someone on his side. He sat down. They talked for over an hour. He told her about his plans for the company. She shared ideas from her time at the warehouse. The conversation flowed easily. For the first time, Isabella felt like an equal. Not a subordinate. Not an enemy. Just another person trying to do good work. As Alexander was leaving, he paused at the door. He looked back at her.
You've changed. It's real. I can see it.
Isabella felt warmth spread through her chest. His approval meant everything. Not because of his power, but because he had earned her respect. He left, and Isabella sat in the quiet office. She looked out at the warehouse floor. The workers were finishing their shifts. They called out goodbyes to each other. They laughed and joked. She was part of that now. Finally, 3 months passed. Winter arrived with cold winds and gray skies. The warehouse felt different now. Warmer somehow. Despite the freezing temperature outside, Isabella had become part of the team. The workers invited her to lunch. They asked her opinion on scheduling. They trusted her. It was a foreign feeling, but she was learning to accept it. One morning she arrived to find the parking lot full. Unusual for 6:30. She walked inside and found the entire day shift gathered. Carla stood on a forklift. She was addressing the crowd. Everyone looked worried. Isabella pushed through to the front. Carla explained that corporate had sent a memo. The warehouse might be closing. Alexander was restructuring again. This location was underperforming financially. The workers would be transferred or let go. Carla's voice shook as she spoke. Many of these people had worked here for decades. This was their livelihood. Their families depended on these jobs. Isabella felt panic rise in her chest. She had not heard about this. Nobody had consulted her. She pulled out her phone and called Alexander. It went to voicemail. She tried Thomas. No answer. She looked at the frightened faces around her. These were her people now. She had to do something.
Everyone back to work. I'm going downtown. I'll find out what's happening. We're not giving up without a fight.
The workers murmured. Some looked skeptical. But Carla nodded. She told everyone to trust Isabella. They dispersed slowly. Isabella grabbed her coat and ran to her car. She drove toward downtown. Her hands gripped the steering wheel. Her mind raced with possibilities. None of them were good. She arrived at the corporate building. The same building where she had insulted Alexander. The same marble steps. The same glass doors. But everything felt different now. She was different. She walked inside with purpose. The receptionist looked surprised to see her. Isabella took the elevator to the 20th floor. Her old office. Someone else worked there now. She walked past it without looking. She went straight to the boardroom. Voices echoed from inside. She pushed the door open. A meeting was in progress. Margaret sat at the head of the table. Alexander was there. Thomas was there. 5 other board members filled the remaining seats. They all turned to look at Isabella. She had not been invited. She had no right to be here. But she did not care.
Is it true? Now, are you closing the warehouse?
Margaret's expression hardened. She told Isabella this was a private meeting. She needed to leave. But Alexander raised his hand. He looked at Isabella carefully.
Yes. The numbers don't support keeping it open. We're losing money every quarter.
Those numbers don't tell the whole story. That warehouse has been neglected for years. Nobody invested in updated equipment. Nobody trained the staff properly. You can't judge it fairly.
One of the board members interrupted. His name was Frederick. He was in his 60s. He had always supported the old way of doing things. Frederick said the decision was final. Sentiment had no place in business. The warehouse would close in 60 days. Isabella felt fury building. But she forced herself to stay calm. She looked at Alexander. His expression was unreadable. Was this a test? Or had he given up on that location? She decided to take a gamble.
Give me 90 days. Let me prove the warehouse can be profitable. If I fail, you can close it. But give me a chance.
The room fell silent. Margaret looked skeptical. Frederick looked annoyed. Alexander leaned back in his chair. He studied Isabella for a long moment.
What would you do differently?
Everything. I'd streamline the supply chain. I'd cross-train workers for flexibility. I'd negotiate better rates with suppliers. I'd implement the efficiency systems I learned at corporate. But I'd do it with the team, not to them.
Alexander glanced at Margaret. Something passed between them. An unspoken communication. Margaret sighed. Margaret agreed to 60 days. Not 90. If Isabella could show 15% improvement, she could keep the warehouse open. If not, it would close as planned. Isabella accepted. She had no choice. She left the boardroom. Her legs felt weak. She had just promised something she might not be able to deliver. She drove back to the warehouse. The workers were waiting. They crowded around her car. Carla pushed to the front. Isabella took a deep breath. She told them about the deal. 60 days. 15% improvement. Or they all lost their jobs. The crowd erupted. Some people shouted that it was impossible. Others said they should start looking for new work. Carla raised her hands for silence. She looked at Isabella. Carla asked what Isabella needed from them. Isabella felt a wave of gratitude. She explained her plan. It would require everyone's cooperation. Longer hours initially. Significant changes to workflow. Complete reorganization. But if they worked together, They had a chance. Jake stepped forward. He said he would do whatever it took. This job had changed his life. He was not giving up without a fight. Other workers nodded. One by one, they agreed. Within minutes, the entire warehouse had committed. Isabella felt tears threatening. She blinked them back. The next 8 weeks were brutal. Isabella worked 16-hour days. She restructured every process. She called in favors from old corporate contacts. She negotiated with suppliers. Some hung up on her. Others remembered how she had treated them. But a few were willing to give her a chance. The workers pushed themselves to exhaustion. They learned new systems. They took on multiple roles. Mistakes happened. Tempers flared. One afternoon, 2 workers got into a shouting match. Isabella had to separate them. She reminded them what they were fighting for. They apologized and got back to work. Alexander visited twice during those weeks. Both times he said nothing. He just observed. His presence made everyone nervous. After his second visit, Isabella confronted him in the parking lot.
Are you hoping we fail? Is that what this is?
Alexander looked surprised by her anger. He shook his head.
I'm hoping you succeed, but I need to know it's real, not just a temporary surge.
Then, trust me. The way I'm learning to trust you.
Alexander's expression softened. He reached out and touched her shoulder briefly. The gesture was simple, but it sent warmth through her entire body. He drove away. Isabella stood in the cold parking lot. Something had shifted between them. Something beyond professional respect. She was afraid to name it. With 2 weeks left, Isabella got a phone call. It was from Richard. She had not heard from him since he resigned. His voice was smooth and friendly. It made her skin crawl. Richard said he had heard about her warehouse project. He admired her determination. He wanted to help. Richard claimed he had connections with a major distributor. He could get them a contract that would guarantee profitability. All she had to do was provide him with some information. Internal reports. Alexander's strategic plans. Just small things. Nothing that would hurt anyone.
You want me to spy?
Richard laughed. He said, spy was such an ugly word. He preferred business intelligence. He reminded her that Alexander had humiliated her. This was just evening the score. And saving her warehouse. Everyone won.
Except my integrity.
She hung up. Her hands were shaking. The offer was tempting. She could save the warehouse. She could save all of those jobs. But she would have to betray Alexander. She would have to become the person she used to be. She sat alone in her office, struggling with the decision. That night, she drove to Alexander's office. It was nearly midnight. She knew he would still be there. He never seemed to sleep. She found him at his desk, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. He looked exhausted. She told him about Richard's call. Every detail. Alexander listened without interrupting. When she finished, he leaned back. He looked at her carefully.
Did you consider accepting?
Yes. For about 30 seconds. Then I remembered who I want to be.
Alexander smiled. It was the first real smile she had seen from him. It transformed his entire face, made him look younger, almost vulnerable.
Richard is getting desperate. He's been trying to build a competing company. He needs inside information to succeed.
Will he come after me again?
Probably. Can you handle it?
I think so. I'm stronger than I used to be.
Alexander stood up. He walked around the desk. He stopped in front of her. They were very close. Isabella's heart raced.
You've become remarkable. You know that.
Isabella did not know what to say. The air between them felt charged. Dangerous. Alexander seemed to realize it too. He stepped back. He cleared his throat.
You should go home. Get some rest. You have 2 weeks left.
Isabella nodded. She left quickly. Her emotions were a confused tangle. Gratitude and attraction and fear. All mixed together. She drove home in a daze. The next morning brought disaster. A major shipment had been delayed. Equipment malfunction at the supplier. The delivery would be 3 days late. 3 days they did not have. The warehouse had promised that shipment to a key customer. If they failed to deliver, they would lose the contract and any chance of hitting their numbers. Carla gathered everyone. They brainstormed solutions. Someone suggested sourcing from a different supplier, but the cost would eat their entire profit margin. Someone else suggested working around the clock, but they could not deliver what they did not have. Everyone looked defeated. Then, Jake had an idea. He knew someone who worked at a competing warehouse. They might have surplus inventory. It was a long shot, but it was their only option. Isabella immediately called. She explained the situation. She begged for help. The competing manager was skeptical. Why should he help a rival? But then he asked who she was. When she said her name, he paused. He said he had heard about her. About her fall from grace. About her redemption arc. It had become legendary in the industry. He agreed to help, but only if she came personally to pick up the inventory, and only if she agreed to return the favor someday. Isabella drove 4 hours to the other warehouse. She loaded the truck herself. The competing manager watched with amusement. He said the old Isabella would never have done manual labor. She said the old Isabella was dead. Good riddance. They both laughed. She drove the truck back herself. She had never driven anything so large. She scraped the side mirror on a highway barrier. She nearly jackknifed on an icy curve. But she made it. When she pulled into the warehouse parking lot at 2 in the morning, the entire night shift was waiting. They cheered. They helped unload. They worked through the night processing everything. By morning, the shipment was ready. They delivered on time. But the victory was short-lived. 3 days before the deadline, Isabella discovered a problem. The numbers looked good, but they were not quite good enough. They were at 13% improvement. She needed 15. She had run out of ideas. She had pushed everything to the limit. There was nothing left to optimize. She sat in her office as the sun set. She had failed. All the hard work. All the sacrifice. It was not enough. Tears ran down her face. She did not try to stop them. She had let everyone down. Carla knocked and entered. She saw Isabella crying. Carla sat down without asking. She handed Isabella a tissue. They sat in silence for a few minutes. Carla said the workers wanted Isabella to know something. Even if the warehouse closed, they were grateful. She had shown them they mattered. She had fought for them. Nobody had ever done that before. Whatever happened next, they would remember. And they would find a way forward. Together. Isabella hugged Carla. They both cried. Then they pulled themselves together. Carla said there was still time. Maybe they could find 2 more percentage points. It was unlikely. But they had to try. Isabella agreed. They worked through the night, checking every calculation, looking for any possible improvement. The next morning, Isabella received an email. It was from a customer. They were placing a large order, one they had been considering for months. They had finally decided to go with Lawrence Industries, specifically with Isabella's warehouse, because of its reputation for reliability and care. The order was huge. It pushed them over 15%. Isabella stared at the screen. She could not believe it. She called Carla. Carla screamed with joy. Within minutes, the entire warehouse knew. People hugged each other. Some cried. Jake lifted Isabella off the ground in celebration. They had done it. Against all odds. They had saved the warehouse. That afternoon, Margaret and Alexander arrived. They reviewed the final numbers. They checked every calculation. Margaret looked impressed. She congratulated Isabella. Yeah. She said this was extraordinary work. The warehouse would remain open, and Isabella would be promoted. Isabella barely heard the promotion details. She was too overwhelmed. After Margaret left, Alexander stayed. The workers had gone home early to celebrate. The warehouse was quiet. Alexander and Isabella stood on the main floor, surrounded by rows of shelves.
I knew you could do it.
I wasn't sure. There were moments I thought I'd failed.
But you didn't give up. That's what matters.
Isabella turned to face him. She had been avoiding this conversation, but she could not anymore. She needed to know.
Why did you really demote me? It wasn't just about teaching me a lesson, was it?
Alexander was quiet for a long time. He looked around the warehouse. His expression was distant.
When I was homeless, I made a promise. If I ever had power, I would use it differently. I would see people, really see them. When I bought into Lawrence Industries, I saw you. And I saw myself. The angry version, the broken version, before someone showed me kindness.
He looked at her. His eyes were intense.
I wanted to save you, the way someone saved me. I just didn't know if it would work.
It worked. You saved me.
They stood close together. The warehouse felt very still, very quiet. Alexander reached out slowly. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was gentle, intimate.
I need to tell you something. This has become complicated.
What has?
My feelings. For you.
Isabella's breath caught. She had wondered, hoped, feared. But hearing him say it made it real.
My feelings are complicated too. You're my boss. You changed my life. I don't know where the gratitude ends and something else begins.
Maybe we don't need to define it yet. Maybe we just need to be honest.
I can do honest.
Alexander smiled. He took her hand. They stood together in the empty warehouse. Two broken people, learning to be whole. But of course, nothing stays perfect. 2 days later, corporate called a mandatory meeting. All warehouse managers, all department heads, everyone gathered in the main conference room. Isabella sat with the other managers. Alexander and Margaret stood at the front. Margaret announced a major expansion. Lawrence Industries was going international. They were opening facilities in 3 countries. They needed experienced leaders, people who understood the new company vision, people who had proven themselves. Margaret said Alexander would be moving to London. He would oversee the European expansion. It was a 5-year commitment. He would leave in 6 weeks. Isabella felt the floor drop out from under her. She looked at Alexander. He would not meet her eyes. After the meeting, everyone filed out slowly. Isabella waited until the room emptied. Alexander remained at the front. Margaret had already left. Isabella walked up to him.
You knew. When we talked in the warehouse, you already knew you were leaving.
Yes.
And you didn't tell me.
I didn't know how.
Isabella felt anger rising, but underneath it was hurt, deep and sharp.
So what was that? In the warehouse. What were you doing?
I was being honest about my feelings. That part was real.
But not real enough to stay. Or to tell me the truth.
Alexander looked pained. He tried to explain. The expansion was crucial. He had to lead it. The company needed him. But Isabella did not want to hear it. She felt like a fool. She had opened her heart. And he was leaving.
I thought I mattered.
You do?
Not enough. No.
She walked out. She did not look back. She went straight to her car. She drove aimlessly for an hour, crying and angry, feeling abandoned again, just when she had started to trust, just when she had started to hope. The next few weeks were torture. Isabella threw herself into work. She avoided Alexander when he visited. She kept conversations brief and professional. He tried to talk to her several times. She always found an excuse to leave. She built walls again. The old defense mechanisms. Protect yourself before someone else can hurt you. Carla noticed. Everyone noticed. But nobody said anything. They had their own work to focus on. The warehouse was busier than ever. Success brought new challenges. More orders. More responsibility. More stress. One evening, Jake found Isabella in her office. She was staring at spreadsheets, not really seeing them. Jake sat down. He said he wanted to tell her something. Isabella barely listened. Jake said when he started working here, he was lost. He had dropped out of school. His parents had kicked him out. He was couch surfing, barely surviving. This job had saved him. But more than that, watching Isabella fight for the warehouse. watching her change. That had shown him something. Jake said people can rebuild, even when everything falls apart. Even when someone leaves. You can still stand. Isabella looked at him. Really looked at him. Jake had grown up in 6 months. He was not the scared kid anymore. And she had helped.
Thank you. I needed to hear that.
Jake smiled and left. Isabella sat alone. She thought about his words. People can rebuild. She had rebuilt once. She could do it again. Even with Alexander gone. Even with her heart broken. She could still be whole. Alexander's last day arrived. The company threw a reception. Fancy catering. Speeches. Board members congratulating him. Isabella almost did not go. But Carla insisted. She said Isabella needed closure. Even if it hurt. Isabella wore a simple black dress. She arrived late. The reception was crowded. Alexander stood near the windows, surrounded by admirers. He looked tired. He had lost weight. The stress of preparation showed. He saw her across the room. Their eyes met. For a moment, everything else disappeared. Then someone pulled his attention away. Isabella got a drink. She made small talk with colleagues. She pretended to be fine. Toward the end of the evening, Alexander found her. He asked if they could talk. Somewhere private. Isabella hesitated. But she agreed. They went to his old office. The one he had worked in before the expansion. It was empty now. Boxes packed. Furniture covered.
I'm sorry for how I handled everything.
Okay.
That's it. Just okay.
What do you want me to say? You made your choice.
Alexander ran his hand through his hair. He looked frustrated.
It's not that simple. This expansion is my responsibility. I built this company's new vision. I have to see it through.
I understand. Really, I do. You have obligations. So do I. To myself. To my healing.
Alexander stepped closer.
This doesn't have to be goodbye forever. 5 years will pass. We can stay in touch.
Alexander. Torn. I'm just learning how to be whole. I can't spend 5 years waiting. That's not fair to either of us.
He looked like she had struck him. But he nodded slowly. He understood. They stood in silence. The city lights glittered outside.
I want you to know something. Meeting you changed me too. You reminded me why I do this work. It's not about money or power. It's about people.
I'll remember that.
They hugged briefly. Isabella felt tears, but she held them back. She left first. She did not trust herself to stay longer. She went home and cried for hours, grieving what might have been, but also accepting what was. The next morning, she woke up with red eyes, but she got dressed. She went to work. The warehouse needed her. Her team needed her. And she needed them. Work became her anchor, her purpose. She poured everything into making the warehouse excellent. Months passed. Winter turned to spring. Isabella was promoted to Regional Operations Director. She now oversaw 5 warehouses. She implemented her systems across all of them. Employee satisfaction rose. Profits rose. She was building something real. Something lasting. She occasionally heard news about Alexander. The European expansion was successful. He had opened 2 facilities ahead of schedule. The business press praised his vision. She was happy for him. And she meant it. She had moved on. Not moved past, but moved forward. One afternoon, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost did not answer. But something made her pick up. Her stomach dropped. Richard's voice. She had not heard from him in almost a year.
What do you want?
Richard said he had been watching her success. Very impressive. He had started his own company. It was growing quickly. He wanted to offer her a position. Chief Operating Officer. Double her current salary. Complete autonomy.
Not interested? I don't need to. I know who you are. I know what you do. The answer is no.
Richard's voice hardened. He said she was making a mistake. Lawrence Industries would not last. Alexander was spread too thin. The company was vulnerable. When it collapsed, she would regret not taking his offer.
If it collapses, I'll rebuild. That's what I do now. Goodbye, Richard.
She hung up. Her hands were steady. No fear. No doubt. She had become someone new. Someone Richard could not manipulate. Someone who knew her own worth. That evening, she drove to her mother's house. Margaret lived in a mansion overlooking the water. Isabella had not visited in months. They talked occasionally, but the relationship was still complicated. She rang the doorbell. Margaret answered. She looked surprised but pleased. They sat in the living room, uncomfortable at first. Then Margaret asked about work. Isabella talked about her new role, the challenges, the successes. Margaret listened carefully. Margaret said she was proud. The words were simple, but they hit hard. Margaret had never said that before. Not really. Isabella felt tears building. Margaret reached out and took her hand. Margaret apologized. She had been too hard, too demanding. She had wanted Isabella to be strong, but she had not taught her to be kind. That was Margaret's failure, not Isabella's.
You did your best. We both did. We just didn't know better.
They talked for 2 hours. About the company. About the past. About Alexander. Margaret admitted she missed having him nearby. He called weekly, but it was not the same. Isabella asked if he ever mentioned her. Margaret smiled sadly. She said he asked about Isabella every single call. Isabella did not know what to do with that information. She left feeling lighter, but also confused. Did it matter if he thought about her? If he was not here? If they were living separate lives? Maybe some things were not meant to be. Maybe that was okay. 2 years passed. Isabella became vice president of operations again. But this time, she earned it. This time she deserved it. The company thrived. The European expansion exceeded projections. Alexander was a legend now. The man who transformed Lawrence Industries. Isabella dated occasionally. Nice men. Decent relationships. But nothing serious. She was content. Her work fulfilled her. Her friendships sustained her. She had built a life she was proud of. Then one morning, Victoria called. She said there was a surprise meeting. All executives. Mandatory attendance. Isabella groaned. She had a busy day planned. But she went. Boardroom was packed. Everyone looked curious. Nobody knew what the meeting was about. Margaret entered with another person. Isabella's heart stopped. It was Alexander. He looked older. A few gray hairs at his temples. Lines around his eyes. But still handsome. Still commanding attention. Their eyes met. She felt everything rush back. All the feelings she had buried. Margaret announced that Alexander was returning. The European expansion was complete. New leadership was in place. Alexander would resume his role as Chief Strategy Officer. He would be based in the main office. Permanently. The room erupted in applause. Everyone was thrilled. Isabella could not move. After the meeting, people swarmed Alexander, asking questions, welcoming him back. Isabella slipped out quietly. She went to her office. She needed time to process. She had built a life without him. She was happy. What did his return change? Everything. Nothing. She did not know. That evening, someone knocked on her office door. She knew who it was. She told him to come in. Alexander entered. He looked nervous. She had never seen him nervous before.
Can we talk?
Of course.
He sat down. They looked at each other. 2 years of silence between them. 2 years of growth. 2 years of missing each other.
I thought about you every day. I know I said we should move on. I tried, but I couldn't.
Alexander. Duck.
Let me finish. I made a mistake. I chose obligation over happiness. I thought I had to sacrifice everything, but I learned something. You can build a company. You can change the world. But if you're alone, it doesn't mean anything.
Isabella felt her defenses crumbling. She wanted to be angry, to protect herself, but she was tired of walls.
I moved on. I built a life. I'm not the same person you left.
I know. I can see it. You're stronger, more confident. It's beautiful.
He leaned forward.
I'm not asking you to go back. I'm asking if we can move forward. Together. If you'll give me another chance.
This is insane. We work together. It's complicated.
Everything worth having is complicated.
Isabella laughed despite herself. He was right. Nothing about their story had been simple. Why should this be?
I need time. To think. To figure out what I want.
I'll wait. However long you need.
He stood to leave. Then he turned back.
For what it's worth. You're the reason I came back. London was successful. But it was empty. You're what makes this home.
He left. Isabella sat alone. Her heart was racing. She was terrified, but also hopeful. Maybe some things were worth the risk. 3 months later, Isabella stood in a different warehouse. A new facility they were opening. The largest one yet. She had overseen the entire project. It was her masterpiece. The grand opening was today. Press was coming. Major clients. Board members. She walked through, checking final details. Everything was perfect. The workers were excited. They had all trained for this moment. She felt proud, not of what she had accomplished alone, but of what they had built together. Alexander arrived early. He had been respectful of her space. Patient as she figured things out. They had grown closer slowly, carefully, learning each other again. He smiled when he saw her.
Ready for this?
More than ready.
Guests began arriving. The ceremony went smoothly. Speeches were made. Ribbons were cut. Everyone toured the facility. They praised the innovation, the efficiency, the human-centered design. As the event wound down, Isabella found herself alone with Alexander. They stood on the loading dock, watching the sun set.
I have something for you.
He pulled out a small box. Isabella's heart jumped. But it was not a ring. It was a key.
This is the key to my apartment. I'm not asking you to move in. Not yet. But I want you to have it. I want you to feel like you have a place with me. Whenever you're ready.
Isabella took the key. It was warm from his pocket. She looked at him. This strange man who had changed her life. Who had broken her. Who had rebuilt her. Who she had rebuilt in return.
I'm scared.
Me too.
What if we mess this up?
Then we'll figure it out. Together.
Isabella laughed. She kissed him. It was their first real kiss. Soft and tentative, but full of promise. When they pulled apart, she leaned against him.
Okay. None of.
Okay, what?
Okay, let's try. Let's see what happens.
Alexander wrapped his arms around her. They stood together as the sky turned purple and gold. Two people who had found each other in the worst way, and chosen each other in the best way. The warehouse hummed with activity behind them. People were working, building, creating something meaningful. Just like Isabella and Alexander, taking broken pieces and making something whole. 6 months later, they were engaged. A year after that, they married. It was a small ceremony. Just close friends and family. Carla and Jake were there. Victoria cried through the whole thing. Margaret smiled more than anyone had ever seen. Even Thomas got emotional. Isabella wore a simple dress. Alexander wore the same gray jacket, the one he had been wearing when they first met. She had insisted. It was part of their story. The ugly beginning that led to something beautiful. They honeymooned at a quiet beach. No phones. No work. Just each other. They talked about the future. About expanding the business. About maybe having kids someday. About growing old together. It all felt possible now. When they returned, Isabella went back to the warehouse. Her warehouse. Where she had learned what really mattered. The workers threw her a surprise party. Everyone was there. Even some who had transferred to other locations. They celebrated together. Like family. That night, as Isabella drove home, she thought about her journey. From the arrogant woman on those marble steps, to the person she was now. Someone who valued people over power. Someone who led with compassion. Someone who understood that true strength came from lifting others. Alexander was waiting when she got home. Their home. He had made dinner. Badly. The kitchen was a disaster. But he had tried. She laughed and helped him salvage it. They ate together, talking about their day, making plans, being normal. Later, they sat on the couch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her. Comfortable silence. The kind that only comes with deep trust.
Do you ever think about that day, when we first met?
All the time.
I was awful to you.
You were hurting. You just didn't know it yet.
Thank you for not giving up on me.
Thank you for not giving up on yourself.
They sat together as the city lights twinkled outside. Two people who had found redemption, not through perfection, but through persistence, through honesty, through choosing each other. Every single day. Years passed. The company continued to grow. Isabella eventually became CEO. Alexander moved into an advisory role. They had 2 children, a boy and a girl. They taught them about kindness, about humility, about treating every person with dignity. The warehouse where Isabella had learned everything became legendary. Business schools studied it. Other companies tried to replicate the model, but they missed the key ingredient. It was not about systems or efficiency. It was about seeing people, really seeing them. Carla retired after 30 years. They threw her a massive party. She cried, happy tears. She told everyone that watching Isabella transform had restored her faith, not just in people, but in the possibility of change. Jake eventually became a warehouse manager himself. He used everything Isabella had taught him. He became known for his leadership style. Firm, but compassionate. He often said Isabella had saved his life. She always corrected him. They had saved each other. On their 10th anniversary, Alexander took Isabella back to that warehouse, the one where everything had changed. It was late. The building was closed, but he had a key. They walked through the empty space, remembering.
Do you have any regrets?
Not anymore. Everything led here. Even the painful parts. Especially the painful parts.
I love who you've become.
I love who we've become.
They stood together in the quiet warehouse, the place where a broken woman had learned to be whole, where judgment had turned to compassion, where power had transformed into purpose. Isabella thought about the person she used to be, that arrogant woman who had insulted a stranger. She felt compassion for that version of herself. That woman had been lost, scared, defending herself the only way she knew how. But she had been capable of change. They all were. As they left the warehouse hand in hand, Isabella made a silent promise. To never forget where she came from. To always remember that every person deserves dignity. To lead with her whole heart, not just her mind. The story of the arrogant heiress and the homeless man became a legend in their industry. People told it at conferences, wrote about it in books, used it to inspire change. But for Isabella and Alexander, it was not a story. It was their life. Messy and complicated, difficult and beautiful, real. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. How did you enjoy today's story? Please leave a rating from 1 to 10. Let us know where you're watching from. And if you have a similar experience or personal story, feel free to share it in the comments. Your engagement greatly helps the growth and longevity of this channel. If you subscribe, you'll receive new stories every day. We hope today's episode brought richness to your day. Thank you for watching.